Our mindset and resultant motivation is a product of what we focus on and the story we tell about what we focus on. Hello, it's Charles Ennis again. And if you watched the first video that I did called Understanding Motivation 1, then you know that motivation is a complex situation and it can't fully be understood with any one idea. In that first video, the idea that I shared was this: motivation is an emotion, and emotions change all the time based on situation. Now, if we think about our situation holistically, it includes what's happening in our body, what's happening in our mind, and what's happening in our life. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit more about what's happening in our mind and how that might affect our motivation. Okay, so the first statement that I start with, I think is pretty straightforward, and it is this: our mindset and our resultant motivation is a product of what we focus on and the story we tell about what we focus on. Okay. So if I was going to try to break that statement down, I'll do it this way. What we focus on affects how we feel. If I take it a step further, the story we tell about what we focus on affects how we feel. And how we feel is important because it affects how we think and what we do. So when we look at behavior, often we can trace it back to what we focused on. Now, when we think about any situation, there are always multiple aspects to a situation, at least two sides of the coin. And so as an example, we have pros versus cons, strengths versus weaknesses, desires versus fears, failures versus successes. Now, depending on which one we focus on, we are likely to feel a certain way. And generally speaking, when we focus on something positive, it is more likely to create the feeling of motivation that draws us towards something. And when we focus on negatives, it's likely to create a tendency to want to avoid. So if you think about some health or wellness goal that you have, or any personal goal that you're trying to accomplish, when you focus on the pros of making that change, generally speaking, you will feel more motivated to pursue that change. But when you focus on the cons of making that change, it is less likely that you will feel motivated to making that change. Okay, so when we think about our focus, it really does influence our motivation. And questions are the thing that directs our focus. So we can shift our motivation simply by asking ourselves different questions. Okay, so if we think about, again, any behavior that you are trying to accomplish, if you focus on the pros, if you focus on what you desire in the situation, what you hope to get out of it, when you focus on your strengths and your abilities, when you focus on your past successes, focusing on all those positive things will tend to encourage you and make you feel a little bit more motivated to pursue whatever goal or change you have in mind. And contrary to that, if you focus on all the cons, if you focus on your weaknesses, if you focus on your limitations, if you focus on your failures, those negatives will tend to shift your feeling and your motivation in a different direction. So again, our focus affects how we feel, and how we feel affects how we think and what we do. So focus is this first part of what's going on in our mind. Now I want to talk a little bit more about story. And I'll do it with an analogy, a little analogy. Two people go to their doctor and they both get bad news. They're pre-diabetic. So they feel whatever they feel, but they both decide, you know what? I'm going to go for a run on Saturday. So both people in their own homes, their own times, they strap on their shoes, they go for a run for the first time in years. And you know exactly how it's going to turn out. After 30 seconds, their heart is beating fast, their lungs are burning, their legs are aching, and they have to stop running. And at this point, they have to explain to themselves what they are experiencing. So the story that one person tells is this: wow, I'm getting old and out of shape. I gotta keep running to build myself back up and stave off diabetes. And the other person tells a different story. Wow, I'm getting old and out of shape. My running days are behind me. I guess diabetes just comes with getting old. Now, even though these people were experiencing the exact same situation, the story they told about the situation led their behaviors in opposite directions. And here's an important thought for you about story. A positive and optimistic story is connected with attempting, trying, striving, and when you hit a setback, not quitting and trying again. Whereas a pessimistic story is connected to avoiding taking on any challenges, not trying, not striving, and giving up at the first sign of setback. Now, knowing that our focus and our story affect our behavior is one thing. Being able to change our stories is a whole different thing. And I fully acknowledge that some stories that we may have been telling for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And so it can be difficult to change a story. But if we can be mindful of how a story is affecting our behavior, we can look at it objectively and then decide, do we want to keep and stick to our story? Do we want to throw it out completely? Or do we want to make some tweaks and some updates to our story? Now, again, I'm not saying that this is always easy, but with practice and effort, we can update our stories. To make this point, let's just pause for a second. I want you to reflect on a time where you changed your opinion about something and it led you to take positive action. Okay, whatever it may be. You may have changed your opinion about your ability to go back to school or to get a job or to do public speaking or to go to a gym, whatever it is. But I just want you to reflect on a time where you successfully updated how you thought about a situation. And when you updated how you thought about the situation, it propelled you forward into success. Okay, so hopefully you came up with something and now you're at least mindful that you're capable of updating your story. Now, focus and story is just part of our mental situation and what's going on in our brains. But our mental situation can also include our knowledge, our attitudes, our beliefs, and our philosophy. And philosophy is a really interesting thing to include, but obviously we all have different philosophies towards life, but our philosophy towards life is what sets up our typical patterns of behavior. And when we adjust or change our philosophy, then it makes sense that our behavior also gets adjusted. Now, there's many great philosophies, and while we get much of our philosophy from our friends and family and the social culture that we witness, I want to go back to ancient Rome and Greece, and I want to draw on the philosophy of Stoicism and make two different points with two different quotes. And so this first quote is from Epictetus, and it says, "There is only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will." Now, this sentiment may sound familiar, and Epictetus is basically saying that we feel more positive emotions when we focus on what we can control. Now, again, I talked about focus affecting our behavior. If you think about any situation in which you want to accomplish something, whatever goal it may be, health and wellness goal, a personal goal, a work goal, there will be things in that situation that you have no control over. Yet, there will also be things in that situation that you have control over. And you've probably heard athletic coaches and leaders say this all the time: control what you can control. And so if we think again about our feeling affecting what we do, when we are focusing on something we can't control, are we more likely to feel empowered or disempowered? It's a trick question, you know the answer. When we focus on what we can't control, we're more likely to feel disempowered. And when we feel disempowered, it's less likely that we will pursue positive action. And so in a situation, we can affect our own motivation by focusing a little bit more on what we can control than on what we can't control. Okay, second quote is from Marcus Aurelius, and it says this: "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment. And so what Marcus Aurelius is saying here is that when we're feeling a certain way about something external, it's really just our story and our interpretation and our judgment that causes us dis-ease. And so focus and story have powerful effects over both our feeling and our action. And so when we are thinking about a situation, when we can harness our mind and deploy it in a way that serves us, we would tend to focus on what is positive, and we would tend to focus on what we can control. Now, I know this is something that, last thing I'll say about story. All of our stories are made up. All of our judgments are made up. I mean, so much of what we say and believe in our head is arbitrary. You know, good or bad, right or wrong, like there's so many things that are arbitrary. So as an example, if you meditate for 5 minutes, is that good or bad? You make it up. If you say it's good, then you'll do it. If you say it's bad, then you won't do it. Is eating salad good or bad? You get to make it up. And so my point is that our stories can often be arbitrary, based on randomness, not based on fact. When we think about our judgments of ourselves, often our judgments of ourselves, again, they're just made up. And I'm not saying that they may not have some accuracy to them, but what I'll say is that our judgments and our stories are arbitrary many of the time. And they may not always serve to make us feel like we want to pursue a certain change. I'm reminded of an incident with my niece, my youngest niece. And she did this multiple times. She has, older sisters and an older brother. And when we would get together and play games, since she was the youngest, she didn't always know exactly how to play the game. So she'd come over and do a couple little things, and then she would proclaim, "I win." And I'd be like, "You didn't win. You didn't even play right." And I'd tell her that, and she'd do something else. "I win." And I'm like, "You didn't win. Like, that's not the game." And it was just so interesting because the story she was telling herself was that she won. And she acted as if she won. She was engaged, she was working, she was focused, she was flowing, because in her mind, she was winning. And so it's a cute story, and it's a reminder to me all the time that our stories are completely made up. And if they are made up and arbitrary, and we have control over them, then maybe we should deploy our stories in a way that serves our goals. Okay, before I go, I'm gonna put on my coaching hat again, and then I'll let you go. And so I want you to think about some health or wellness goal that you have, some personal goal. It could be in any dimension of wellness. Okay. Now, first thing I want you to think about is, what do you desire in that goal? What's important for you about that goal? I also want you to think, what are the pros to change? If you made this change, if you accomplished this goal, what would you get out of it? Okay. Now, which strengths do you have? What are you good at? Are you creative? Are you caring? Are you smart? Are you wise? Are you brave? Are you strong? Are you honest? Are you humble? What strengths do you have that you can deploy to try to reach this goal? Okay. Think about times when you have been successful in the past, and it may not have been in this exact realm, but anytime you've been successful, can you draw upon any past success to help give you confidence that you can master or accomplish this new goal with effort and practice? Cool. So I know I threw a lot of questions at you, but it was to try to make the point to you that what we focus on affects how we feel. And when we are looking at a goal, when we focus on positives, it generally pushes up our motivation to pursue that goal. All right. So I know I've said a lot about motivation in all these videos, but I'll recap it again. Motivation is an emotion, and emotions change all the time based on situation. The situation in our brain affects our feeling of motivation to do an activity. There's so much more that could be said about our thinking than I covered in this video. But if we center around the ideas of focus and story, When we focus on a positive, it is more likely that we will feel motivated to pursue. And a positive and optimistic story is associated with pursuing and growth and trying again when we fail and not giving up, and persistence and courage. And so I hope that just gives you a little bit of perspective on something you can practice. With practice, we can get better. We can change our thinking habits. And I hope that I said something in this video that will spark your interest and maybe help you to start changing your philosophy and get you motivated so that you can accomplish whatever worthy goal you have. All right, that's all for now. Until later, take care and be well.